Hi, my name is Sidra, and I'm the coordinator of the Immigrant and Refugee Communities Neighbors, Friends, and Families campaign. And in this video, we're going to talk about 4 barriers that immigrant and refugee women may face when they are seeking support for domestic violence. All women can face challenges when they're looking for resources and support that they need to leave a situation of domestic violence and get support. But today we're going to talk about the specific barriers that are faced by women from immigrant and refugee communities because they're often left out of the conversation. In Ontario, it can be very difficult for women from immigrant and refugee communities to access support. This is because of specific barriers that affect immigrant and refugee communities. We're going to go over these barriers one by one, and at the end of this video, I'll list some resources that may help some women overcome these barriers and access the resources they need to find safety. For some women in immigrant and refugee communities, their status in Canada is not secure. They may be in the process of being sponsored to become a permanent resident. They may be in the process of making a refugee claim, or they may be here as a migrant worker, or also known as a temporary foreign worker, working as a live-in caregiver or a farm laborer. And finally, they may have no legal status in Canada at all and are living as a non-status person. For these women, their lack of permanent resident status in Canada can be a barrier to accessing support for abuse. For example, an abuser who is sponsoring a woman to become a permanent resident may say to her that if she tries to get support or if she leaves him, that he will withdraw that sponsorship. Or if a woman has no legal status in Canada, he may threaten to report her to border services if she does not do what he says. It's important in all of these cases to know that the immigration and refugee system in Canada is very complicated and every situation is different. Women should get legal advice about what steps they can take next and what options are available to them. At the end of this video, we'll talk about resources she can use to get legal advice. Another reason that immigration status can be a barrier to accessing service is that many services ask for proof of status. This can make women with no status in Canada feel afraid or uncomfortable with accessing those services. And in fact, women without status in Canada may be afraid to call the police in an emergency because of fear that the police may communicate their status to border services. Women in general live with more poverty than men, but this is particularly true for immigrant and refugee women in Ontario. Immigrant and refugee women in Ontario are overrepresented in some of the least stable and lowest paying jobs. So what does having a lower income and higher rates of poverty have to do with abuse? Well, simply put, it costs money to leave an abusive situation. We all know that the cost of living in Ontario is going up. Home prices are rising, which makes the cost of rent rise, and at the same time, the cost of transportation and food and childcare are going up. This means that women often find it very difficult to leave an abusive situation and be able to support themselves Financial dependence on an abuser can tie them to him. And in fact, workers in Ontario shelters have said that the high cost of market rent is the number one reason that women stay with their partners or return to them. There are affordable housing programs in many cities, but wait lists can be long. Women from immigrant and refugee communities may fluently speak 2, 3, 4, or 5 languages, but they may have challenges communicating in English. It may be difficult for a woman who does not speak English and who is living with domestic violence in Ontario to find services in the languages that she speaks. She also may not be aware of interpreter services that could be available to her. A lot of resources and information on domestic violence, including this video, are in English and may not be translated into the languages that she speaks. Our campaign does have a plan to create materials translated into the many different languages spoken by immigrant and refugee communities in Ontario, and we will be making those materials available to you. Not all immigrant and refugee women are racialized. There are immigrants that could come from Europe or the United States or Australia who would be white. But for immigrant and refugee women who are racialized, they will most likely face barriers of racism and discrimination. There was a research study recently conducted in Ontario on the experiences of visible minority immigrant women who are seeking support for domestic violence. This study found that many women who were visible minorities received racist and hurtful remarks from service providers when they were looking for support. For example, according to this paper, one woman was told by her abuser's probation officer that, and I quote, "This is all because of your culture and your religion. Do you even understand the law? Do you even speak English? Do you get these things? Like you just got married to him for money and to come to Canada, right?" It is these kinds of racist and discriminatory comments that can prevent women living with domestic violence from accessing the support that they deserve. There is a double standard. When someone from a European background, Canadian family, experiences domestic violence, the domestic violence is treated as an individual problem and it is not seen as a reflection on the community as a whole. In comparison, when domestic violence happens in other communities, sometimes it is used to stereotype the whole community, and we are told that the domestic violence is happening because of our culture. This can lead some communities to hesitate in even talking about domestic violence because they do not want to contribute to stereotypes that already exist about them. Now that we've talked about these barriers, I'm going to give you some resources that may help. The first resource is the Assaulted Women's Helpline. This is an Ontario-based helpline that offers 24/7 support in over 200 languages. By calling the Assaulted Women's Helpline, someone can get access to referrals and resources in their community that may help. They also offer emotional support and counseling over the phone. The second resource I want to tell you about is Legal Aid Ontario. Legal Aid Ontario has special family law services to help people living with domestic violence. If you are experiencing domestic violence, you can call Legal Aid Ontario for a free 2-hour consultation with a lawyer. This lawyer will tell you the truth about your legal rights and will also be able to provide information on immigration or refugee matters. And they are available regardless of what your immigration status in Canada is. There are also free telephone interpretation services for people who do not speak English or French. There are other services that a woman living with abuse may qualify for, and it's important to check out the Legal Aid Ontario website for information about eligibility for that. The Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration provides funding for language interpreter services for victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. These language interpreter services are available for people who have limited abilities to speak English or French, and also for people who are deaf or hard of hearing or oral deaf. And this covers sign language in both English and French. Interpretation is there so that service providers can communicate with their clients. For some eligible services, interpretation is available without cost. To learn more, visit the Language Interpreter Services website. The final resource I want to tell you about is the Domestic Violence Portable Housing Benefit. This is a new pilot program that was launched by Ontario, and it's running in 22 communities in Ontario. The program is designed to help approximately 1,000 victims of domestic violence per year. Survivors who are enrolled in this pilot program will have the option of having a portable housing benefit, which is money they can use towards finding housing. This will allow them to not have to wait for a social housing unit to become available. I hope you found this information useful. Knowledge is power, and the more we know about the barriers that are faced by immigrant and refugee women seeking support and resources that are available to help overcome those barriers, the better position we'll be in to help women access safety and have the safe lives and happy lives that they deserve. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.